I have played Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD-2D Remake. I have also put in over 80 hours. I have rolled credits on both Dragon Quest 1 and 2, and I've done everything both games have to offer. And of course, I got that platinum trophy, so I am excited to share my thoughts and opinions today with you on this one. So with that all being said, what is up guys, Jen here, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. Got you covered with timestamps, so if you want to skip to a certain section, feel free to do so. All I ask is you to support the channel and hit the like button, it helps out a lot. And if you want to stick around for some more Dragon Quest content, you're already in the right place, just hit that subscribe button. Huge shout out to Square Enix for providing me with the game so I can gather my thoughts, my opinions, and the footage you are seeing in the video. Though with that said, these are my opinions and my opinions alone. I think the obvious approach for this video is if we break it up into Dragon Quest 1 and Dragon Quest 2. But before we dive into Dragon Quest 1, I just want to talk about some general settings and quality of lives that you'll find in both games that might help you, or there might just be settings you want to ignore. Let's talk about difficulty settings. These are the same difficulty settings from Dragon Quest 3 HD-2D Remake. So you've got Draki Quest, which is the easy mode, but you can now turn the invincibility on or off. You've got the Dragon Quest difficulty, of which I had for my playthroughs of both Dragon Quest 1 and 2. And then you have Draconian Quest for those that really want the challenge. There is also another option included here, which is the ability to recover your HP and MP when leveling up. Other settings that you can fiddle around with, and I recommend a couple of settings in this one, is the helpful setting. So you can turn on and off the quest help text. You have the objective markers, of which I had switched off because it really gave me that OG Dragon Quest experience of talking to the NPCs and getting invested in the world. And I really recommend that for those that want to have that experience. We also have the options to turn the treasure chest locations on or off, and then there's an option to turn the secret spots on or off. These are the locations that are scattered throughout the world map that can offer a couple of items or NPCs to interact with. Apart from that, Dragon Quest 1 and 2 will work relatively the same. For those that are bothered about the graphics optimization, I played on PS5. I had the graphics option on. It's a lot more sharper and still to me ran in 60 frames per second, and that is the footage you are seeing in this video. So with all that out the way, and if you have any questions, let me know, let's dive into Dragon Quest 1. And we are going to start off with the story of Dragon Quest 1. And in a nutshell, I would say that Dragon Quest 1 is a really good prelude to Dragon Quest 2. And that's both in its story and its gameplay, by the way. And that doesn't belittle it whatsoever. This is a great experience to have with Dragon Quest 1. And with the story, of course, it's based on the original Dragon Quest 1, which is the sequel to Dragon Quest 3. So with this trilogy having that approach, you are getting a benefit if you have played Dragon Quest 3 before this one, though I see no problem with people diving into this game as their first game, doing 2 and 3 afterwards and putting all the pieces together that way. But I do really think it's more rewarding if you have played Dragon Quest 3 first. So this story, of course, introduces more of Rubis, which was really nice to see. I'm going to try and not go into too many details because I think you should experience it for yourself. All of the optional things that you had in the original Dragon Quest 1, for example, saving the princess from the dragon, is all mandatory and is woven really nicely into the main story with additional flashback scenes and nods towards Dragon Quest 2 and nods back to Dragon Quest 3. Voice acting adds to the telling of the story, though I personally wish there was a little bit more because there were certain scenes that weren't voice acted and I was like, oh man, I've got to read. But it didn't really detract from my experience of the story. It just would have been nice with this shorter experience in Dragon Quest 1 to have voice acting throughout all of the story scenes. Apart from that, again, a great prelude to Dragon Quest 2 and sets it up really nicely. Now we're going to dive into the gameplay, and for Dragon Quest 1 in particular, I clocked in just under 25 hours to get everything done. That's 100%, and that 25 hours was such a pleasure. I like this small experience, and I think a lot of people are going to enjoy that experience because it is paced really well in both its story and its exploration. But exploration is what we're going to be talking about now, and it is taking what Dragon Quest 3 HD-2D Remake did so well in expanding the world, and the world of Alfgard was a pleasure to explore. You have that same experience of leaving Tantagel and going off the off-beaten path. Remember, I had the quest locations switched off, so I spoke to NPCs. I roamed into parts of the map where I got my ass absolutely whooped, just like I did when I played the original Dragon Quest 1, and it was nice to have that learning experience. Now, this was expanded upon the original Dragon Quest 1, so we have got bigger towns to explore with more nooks and crannies and barrels and pots and everything else in between to try and find items and mini medals. We of course have new locations like the Roadside Inn, where they introduced the story of the Thieves' Key and how we get that. There are plenty of locations like that, and there is additional dungeons which again are woven into the story, which, like I said, is paced really well, and I didn't have a dull moment exploring any of these locations. The world map is bigger, there's secret spots to find, so if anything looks a little bit odd, it's probably a location you can visit to find some extra items, maybe a mini medal, maybe there's some NPCs bringing some more additional story and lore to the Dragon Quest Erdrick trilogy. So I recommend you just go out and just have a good time, and not much more to say when it comes to exploration in Dragon Quest 1. The biggest additional thing here is the mini medals, and there's 40 of those to collect, of which you can get better items. And I suggest, because of how Dragon Quest 1 works, once you have access to trade in those medals, trade them in as often as you can, because those items are going to help you out considerably. Let's talk about combat, and combat I absolutely loved here in Dragon Quest 1. So let me break it down to you why that is. It is because we are playing as a solo protagonist. Most RPGs that we've played, we start off as a solo hero and we gather a band of characters and we go into battles with 3 or 4 or even 5 characters sometimes, of which we could swap in and out, and gives us layer of strategy and makes battles quite easy to manage as more you get on. With Dragon Quest 1 here, with the solo hero then going against multiple enemies, man, this is quite the test in your ability to look at your abilities and spells, what you have to your disposal, and make you strategize just the smallest of battles. And that's what made it so enjoyable for me, because I got to try out abilities that I probably would have never tried out if I had a party of 4. And this came into play for Dragon Quest 2, because there are abilities that are here that are in Dragon Quest 2, and because I'm using them more here, it already embedded them in my mind to, hey, this is a good ability to probably use against this enemy. And with the additional help that you can have in battles to let you know what enemies are weak against, Dragon Quest 1 is definitely more of a strategic turn-based game. Now the hero has access to loads of spells and have access to loads of abilities, of which you can gather by grabbing scrolls or just by naturally leveling up. Scrolls are new items that you can find, which has a story attachment to it, of which I won't spoil. So when you get into battle and when you're against 4 enemies, it can be quite overwhelming, because you just get the 1 turn and they can have their 4 turns in a row, and it can really bug you over or get you in the yellow health. So this is where you have a layer of strategy, and one ability straight off the bat that helped out considerably was Cop Out, because it had the ability to reflect enemy attacks onto another enemy. So this did me a massive favor if I went into a battle with 4 enemies quite early on and I put on Cop Out straight off the bat, I could probably eliminate 1 or 2 enemies to then narrow and make the playing field a little bit more even and in my favor. Abilities that were specific to enemy types became very useful as I came across those enemy types, like Dragon Slash and Cattle Prod. But then more debuffing attacks like Attack Attacker and spells like Fizzle and Snooze really started to help me out and gave me the opportunity to manage these big group of enemies. And it was really rewarding getting through some more of the tougher fights. Now, a question some of you might have is about metal monsters, and I'll talk about it ever so briefly, but yes, you go against the metal slimes here, and you're probably thinking, hey, if there's only 1 of you, then that means they're going to run away a little bit quicker. It seems like they've tweaked these ever so slightly to accommodate the fact that you're just 1 hero and they have more turns before they decide to run away. Sometimes you might be really unlucky and they do run away straight away, but I found myself having them slimes stay a little bit longer for the party than usual, and I definitely had the opportunity to get them down and get the experience that I needed to give me that boost. Before we finish up on combat with Dragon Quest 1, I'll briefly talk about Sigils. I'll go into more detail when we talk about the combat of Dragon Quest 2, but this is something that's infused in the story, but each sigil brings a different property to battle, whether it's replenishing MP, HP, allowing spells to crit, and allowing physical type skills to crit also. And then we have a sigil which will allow you to change an ability on what it does. A go-to skill change would be Dragon Slash to double Dragon Slash, which obviously will do even more damage to dragon type enemies. This is a welcome addition here in Dragon Quest 1 because you're playing as a solo hero, but it's much more beneficial in Dragon Quest 2, and we'll go over that once we get there. So I really like the way that battles were and the way that they have been balanced. I had no problems and it was really rewarding. Now, when it comes to Dragon Quest 1's endgame, it was more of a cleanup than an endgame, and most of the cleanup was mini medals and other items that I may have missed and filling out the bestiary. But I really enjoyed my time with Dragon Quest 1. It was a really good setup for Dragon Quest 2, and again, that doesn't bash it whatsoever. It was a great experience and a great time. So now let's talk about Dragon Quest 2. Again, if it wasn't obvious, it's very beneficial that you play Dragon Quest 1 before you play 2, because this game ties everything together and it brings everything full circle. Because Dragon Quest 2 is great. It is absolutely improved from what it was back in the day, and especially the Switch mobile port that I played last year. This may move into a lot of people's top 5 or even top 3 Dragon Quest games with what they have done here in this one. So let's start off with the story, but we're going to keep it brief. Much like Dragon Quest 1, it expands on everything, but we have the addition of the fourth scion of Erdrick with the Princess of Cannock. We have numerous callbacks to Dragon Quest 1 and Dragon Quest 3 in this game, and again, without saying much more, it is just tying up this trilogy perfectly and leaving the trilogy to be a go-to trilogy of games to play for anyone that wants that kind of experience, if that makes sense. Again, with the voice acting was superb here. It added to the story so much. I just wish there was more. I wanted more voice acting. The most unique thing about Dragon Quest 2 here is that we have a band of heroes that are all related through the blood of Erdrick, and they get to know each other as the game progresses, and the voice acting brings it out. I just wanted it a little bit more because there is some really good chemistry between these characters. And I think I'm going to leave story there and we're going to talk about exploration. Now, with Dragon Quest 2, I put in around 50 to 55 hours here, and the main culprit was mini medals and not having a guide, but I managed to do it because I've got that platinum trophy. But the exploration and just taking in this world was also a contributor to the fact of how many hours I put into this, because we don't just have the land, we have the depths of the sea, and we have even deeper seas to explore with a load of other things. So let's break it down and start off with just the exploration of the world. Much like Dragon Quest 1 and Dragon Quest 3, we have an expansive world to discover with new locations, with the locations from Dragon Quest 1. And when I say the locations from Dragon Quest 1, all the main towns are there, but not all the dungeons and all of the other little places to visit are there either. But it's nice to see that all of the towns are intact, and they bring not only nods back to Dragon Quest 1, but they tie into the story of Dragon Quest 2 really nice. We have the return of secret spots as well, so pots, barrels, random locations on the floor. There's so many items to find, and it's always a pleasure in Dragon Quest games just exploring these worlds, and it didn't stop here with Dragon Quest 2. Now let's talk about the seas ever so briefly. We of course get the ship quite early on in the game and we sail the seas, but as time goes on and we weave in the stories of the fairies, the dwarves and the mermaids, we then have the ability to go underwater and explore the seas, and this just adds another layer to that exploration. There's more locations to find, there's more sparklies to find, and of course there is the records of the world which harken back to a lot of Dragon Quest 1 stuff that you can find as well. So exploration in Dragon Quest 2 is just mind-blowing on how many things you can find here, and it was an absolute ball of a time. Next up, we have combat, and I guess I'll harken back to what I said in Dragon Quest 1, because this is very different. We now have a party of 4 heroes as opposed to 1, so there's a lot more flexibility. Each character, each descendant of Erdrick has a unique property to them. If you've played the original Dragon Quest 2, you kind of know what you're getting with them, but none of these folks are squishy and die often, much like they did in the original. You're going to have a good time strategizing with these folks. Some of them come with really crazy abilities. Heck, the Princess of Canuck was a pleasure to play with the amount of abilities that she has to her disposal, especially in the late game. She was like a key party member, a key player of who I wanted to give the best equipment to because of the ability she brought to the table. Of course, scrolls return to learn abilities, which is woven into the story again, which, well, I won't spoil, but there are multiple scrolls of the same thing, so some of the characters can learn the same abilities, and some of these abilities are really, really good. Like I said, it's just something that you're going to want to dive into, and at first when you find a scroll and you have multiple party members to choose from, you're going to want to make a choice, but leave in the back of your mind that you'll have the opportunity to get another one to learn for the other character it's available to as well. But when it comes to battles, it's much akin to what it was in Dragon Quest 3 HD-2D Remake, but the biggest step up to combat as a whole is the Sigils. We mentioned it when we're talking about Dragon Quest 1, but Sigils bring so many different properties to Dragon Quest 2, like the aforementioned ability to replenish MP, to replenish HP, to have critical attacks and spells, but the Soul Sigil is where it's all at because you have the ability to change what some of the descendants of Erdrick's attacks will be. For example, the Prince of Canuck's Flame Slash can turn into Temper Tantrum. The Prince of Meadenhall's Demon Demeanor can turn into Quadra Slash. The Princess of Moonbrook's Lashings of Love can turn into Pink Tornado, and the Princess of Canuck's Thin Air can turn into Tooth and Claw. This usually triggers when you are below 50% health, but there is hidden mechanics in this battle system of which you can learn by reading books and talking to NPCs to tell you the prerequisites to get these suit up skills to change even before you hit 50%. So there's so many hidden mechanics, and it really takes both Dragon Quest 1's and 2's battle system and takes it to new heights and allows more strategy and bringing that extra layer to combat here in Dragon Quest 2. Now we go to the end game of Dragon Quest 2, and with Dragon Quest 2 being the bigger game, the end game here is pretty crazy. There was a lot of things to do here, but do know that the characters do all have a alternate costume, and that doesn't include the cat and dog suits that you get from if you've got a Dragon Quest 3 HD-2D save. So if you decide to play on a different platform, you can still get them costumes in the game. Don't worry about that. But there are other costumes that aren't those, and it was a bit of a surprise to me. This also includes, and I forgot to mention, that there is something really, really cool in Dragon Quest 1, which I think a lot of people will appreciate, and I'll leave it at that. But yeah, the end game here in Dragon Quest 2 was quite the trip, and I enjoyed everything it had to offer, and especially with no guides. It's always great. I feel very privileged to have the opportunity to play these games before they come out and not have guides, and get frustrated that I can't find that last damn mini medal. There was one that I couldn't find, and it took hours. I went over all the map locations, secret spots 3 times over just to discover that there was a certain place that had an extra place that wasn't marked on the map, and I went in there, used no for treasure. There's one treasure here, and I was like, is this it? And it was it. So it was just such a great time, and again, I hope that you can all try and have the same experience, turn all those objective markers off, and just dive into these games and have a great time. This tied the Erdrick trilogy really nicely for me personally, playing through these games, and truly brought everything full circle for me. So that's everything when it comes to Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD-2D Remake. If you have any questions and I'm allowed to answer them, then let me know in the comments section down below. This has been a long one. We talk about 2 good games here, and I'm hoping that you've enjoyed your time. If you've sat throughout the whole video and listened to everything that I've had to say, I hope I have done my job in letting you know that these are great games, because they are. So I'm going to leave it there. I appreciate your time. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want more Dragon Quest content, and until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.